Middlemarch is a novel in 8 volumes published in 1872 by George Eliot. It focuses on the lives and challenges of an eclectic ensemble cast who live in a small town in England in the early 19th century. It's an excellent book, and it's recommended that anyone who has not done so already read it as soon as possible. As a public domain work and classic, it should be available at your local library and bookstore as well as Project Gutenberg. On the technical side of things, the prose is engaging, engrossing, and manages to use competent language and sentence structure to bolster the text. The vocabulary fares similarly, allowing for more extravagant words while not descending into overtly purple prose. The overall construction of the work is well done. Humor is used sparingly, and characters are questioned but not judged, regardless of their actions. Sometimes the prose lays bare the flaws of the characters for the audience to question, which is an effective way to avoid the preachiness that many works fall into, especially those of this era. The narrative itself is excellent and is standout amongst many of its contemporaries. While it is somewhat limited by the setting and concept, it is enticing, engaging, and evocative. It is unique in being very unfantastical. Many stories in this time period and even today, even if they take place in a realistic setting, often have the characters go through events that strain credibility. Middlemarch has things happen to characters without their foreknowledge, but these are always due to their past actions. Of course, in reality, you can be affected by something you didn't cause, but many stories have characters go through events without having any control over their circumstances. This is not the case in Middlemarch, and there are no Deus or Diablos ex machinas. The book follows multiple characters through a few years of their lives. In the book, these interleave, but I will summarize them mostly separately for a young woman enamored with a much older man. Her friends and well-wishers advise against this, including her sister Cecilia, Sir James Chatham, a prospective suitor, and her bumbling and sexist but somewhat benevolent uncle Mr. Brooks. Chatham helps Dorothea build cottages for the poor in the community, and Dorothea has a deep yearning to be part of something important and improving the world. The man, Mr. Casaubon, is selfish and abrasive, with delusions of grandeur, and he brushes off Dorothea's attempts to connect with him. He starts a friendship with his ward and cousin, Ladislav. Casaubon is jealous of this younger man, and so it must be noted that Casaubon does not have any ideas of infidelity between Dorothy and Ladislav, but still, on his deathbed, he bars Ladislav from marrying his wife in the future and ensures that she would lose her property if such an event would hypothetically take place. Fred Vincy and Mary Garth have been childhood friends and are in love with each other. Fred went to college to study for the clergy, but Mary thinks that he would be living a lie preaching. Fred has a gambling debt and attempts to wrangle money, though he does not explicitly ask for it, from Peter Featherstone, uncle to both Fred and Mary by marriage, to pay it off, after acquiring a line of credit from Mary's father who cannot pay it. Peter asks for a letter in writing from another one of Fred's uncles, Bulstrode, to certify Fred's good standing. Bulstrode is an irascible religious merchant who's one of the most politically powerful people in Middlemarch, and he alleged that Fred exploited his relationship with Peter, who would inherit him to his will, on credit. After Fred's father intercedes, he relents, but the money is less than what Fred needs. Fred attempts to retrieve the rest of the money in some other manner, but he fails, and Caleb Garth, Mary's father, has to fork over the cash at great personal loss. Lucius Lightgate is a doctor who studied in Paris and had a traumatic experience with an infatuation. In arriving in Middlemarch, he aims to make a name for himself and revolutionize the methods of medicine in the town, which relies heavily on the overprescription of drugs. He wishes to work for a new hospital and apply his techniques there, but Bulstrode funded the building, and he demands that Lightgate votes to certify a clergyman of his choosing to work for the hospital. and to cave to a more spiritual-oriented method of healing. After being antagonized by his older colleagues for his unorthodox methods, Lightgate acquiesces. Rosamund Vinci is bored and uninterested by the town's male population but quickly falls for the charming and handsome Lydgate, who is related to nobility. Lydgate finds her charming but is unwilling to enter into marriage and breaks off their acquaintance. But after Rosamund expresses her feelings, he makes her an offer. Side note, I don't know how you pronounce this guy's name, so I'm going to be very inconsistent. Fred takes ill and is healed by Lightgate. Mary works for Featherstone, who is on his deathbed. Dying, he asks her to destroy a will he placed in a safe, but she refuses, fearful of legal reprisal. Peter dies, and it's revealed that he wished for his estate to be transformed into an almshouse. If Mary had destroyed the will, Fred would have inherited the majority instead. Fred makes to take up the clergy examination, but after passing, he is guided by a friend to listen to his heart. He takes up employment with Caleb Garth, who manages properties, and finds himself married to Mary and in the stewardship of the Featherstone estate, which passes through Bulstrode's hands during the course of the novel. Bulstrode meets an old acquaintance, a scoundrel called Raffles, who reveals an unsavory detail about his past. Meanwhile, Lightgate spent beyond his means to reward himself and Rosamund with a lavish life, and following a tragic miscarriage, finds himself in debt, which strains their marriage. Bulstrode is revealed to be the cause of Ladislav's mother's misfortune, and Raffles takes ill before telling the secret to Caleb Garth, who is discreet. Lightgate attempts to save his life at Bulstrode's behest, but the latter lets Raffles die of negligence after disobeying the doctor's instructions, and pays off the multifarious debts Lightgate had incurred. However, Raffles had tattled to other men besides Caleb Garth, and the two men find themselves ostracized by the town. That's to say, Lightgate and Bulstrode. Ladislav gets a job working for Brooke's political paper and supports the latter's bid for election, but this goes poorly because Brooke is a bad politician. After Casaubon dies and his will is revealed, he leaves Middlemarch, but his heart pines for Dorothea. Chettam and Celia marry and have a child. Chettam is opposed to Ladislav, but his sister-in-law is not perturbed. Dorothea, who hears of Lightgate's predicament, intercedes for him, and the latter refunds Bulstrode after Dorothea pays his money. Chettam is vexed by this. Ladislav returns, having solidified his love for Dorothea, but the latter is found in a compromising position with Rosamund, which causes a misunderstanding between him and her. After hearing about what Dorothea did for her husband, Rosamund explains Ladislav, and he and Dorothea have a romantic reunion. Ladislav marries her and becomes an MP, while Dorothea works on improving the status of people alongside her husband. There are many aspects of the narrative this summary glossed over and did not elaborate on, as well as the themes and concepts that permeate the text, such as the discrimination Dorothea faces and the parallels between the needs. Reading the story would be something that would be recommended to anybody. Even with foreknowledge of some parts of the story, there's still a lot to discover. From an artistic point of view, Middlemarch, despite following a set of semi-aristocrats, feels remarkably poignant in highlighting many issues that are commonly faced by humans of pretty much every societal background. Dorothea's regret of her naivete and dealing with disillusionment, Ladislav pining for a woman he believes he can never be together with, Fred disappointing people he cares for, and Lightgate's money troubles staining his friendship, are all things that are relatable in some way or the other, even if we don't experience the exact things. Regardless of social status, class, wealth, or culture, most people will encounter events similar to the stuff in this book. Art often seeks to encapsulate beauty, but that's not the only thing it represents. In some forms, art seeks to look at the human experience as well, and at this, Middlemarch succeeds. Characters often encounter challenges that mirror each other. Fred and Lightgate both have financial troubles. Lightgate and Dorothy are both stuck in marriages that differ from their fantasies. Ladislav and Fred are both in love, but their beloved seems so far out of reach. The duality of this, as well as how differently these trials affect the protagonists, lend itself very well to depict a picture of modern humanity. Dorothea's marriage is analogous to so many decisions that many of us have made or will make. Entering a relationship, moving to a new country, getting a new job, and realizing that was not what you thought it was. Fred shows how our mistakes hurt others and that we may have to make tough choices to redeem ourselves, even if we avoid punition. Lightgate shows the effect of challenge on our family and ourselves, and how even innocuous choices, if undertaken blindly, can harm us. Whereas it can be argued that Fred and Dorothea at least knew to some extent what they were getting to and were wont to desist. Two characters, however, stand out amongst the rest. While the main cast deal with the fallback of honest mistakes, this duo represents the consequence of an absence of empathy. Casaubon and Bulstrode are both central to the plot, and in some ways they can be considered the antagonists of the novel. But they're also well illustrated as people with their own lives, feelings, and motivation, and Eliot invites us to feel empathy for them, despite them seemingly lacking this resolve for others. Unlike contemporary villains like Heathcliff in Wuthering Heights, Glyde and Fosco in The Woman in White, or Luzin in Crime and Punishment, the duo are not cartoonishly evil. They do not wish to cause misery, and their crimes are not overly malicious. They just lack empathy. Casaubon might be considered the lesser of the two evils, but unlike Bulstrode, he lacks any awareness that what he's doing is harmful. He does not comprehend why Dorothea feels that she has to help him or shows interest in his task. He does not understand why she feels sorry for Ladislav, why she wishes to build cottages, why she wishes to do something, or why she gives him praise for what he views as a formality in bankrolling his cousin. Therefore, he remains incognizant of her wife and her desires, viewing her as essentially nothing more than set dressing that can communicate. He refuses to talk with her and becomes indignant if she so much as voices a question regarding his conduct or his work, and tries to control her actions beyond the grave, unwittingly jeopardizing his life's work in the process. There can be two considerations for why he does this. The society he occupies does not register his actions as sinful, illegal, or immoral. Even today, it would be unlikely that he would face repercussions for his actions. Still, the harm he caused Dorothy in both life and death is tangible. The other reason, which compounds with the first, is that he lacks empathy. He does not understand Dorothea, and he does not care for her. Mr. Brooke is one of the other characters who, besides Casaubon, is openly sexist. He openly denigrates women and their choices in front of his two nieces. However, despite this belief, which is reprehensible, he does seem to care for them, at least to some regard. He expresses concern for Dorothea marrying Casaubon. He might not be able to read their minds, and his lodging of Ladislav causes great consternation to Chetam, but he's also somewhat perceptive towards others' feelings and shows compassion, even when he cannot understand what's going on. Casaubon lacks both and only cares for himself. Even on his deathbed, he does not understand why his actions are bad. Eliot was of course commenting on the deep-rooted sexism in her time and the time of Dorothea. Middlemarch was set 40 years before when it was published, and if it was published today, it would be set in the 80s. Social commentary aside, it also highlights how not extending our empathy towards others can be harmful, even in a scenario where we're not negatively affected ourselves. Eliot extends her empathy to Casaubon at a time when most readers would not, and doing so shows a bit of him within us. Of course, most people, at least today, should not be so callous, but even the best of us can fall victim towards this. The events of human history past the time Eliot lived and even today show this. Most of us will not murder or torture others, but any of us can disengage our empathy to other people. Even with his lack of empathy, Casaubon fails again when he exhibits jealousy regarding Ladislav's friendship with Dorothea. Compassion too is important, especially when you can't understand how someone thinks or operates. Caring for their well-being, even in a flawed manner, and being open to criticism will alleviate this to some extent. Casaubon fails in this regard and fails further in communicating his thoughts effectively on the matter to Dorothea. When they first develop affections for each other, she's enamored with his explanations and expounding of his works and topics related to it, which appeal to her ecclesiastical inclinations. For Casaubon, a young woman paying attention to, in his eyes, topics of deep import is something that gives him great rapture. Their intentions do not seem to delve too deeply into the carnal realm even when they're married, and he outright rejects the implication of infidelity, which, while admirable, does not absolve him of his actions. I earlier stated that Casaubon thought of his wife as set dressing, but it would be more accurate to say he treats her like a cheerleader, someone who cheers him on and supports him, but who cannot help or comprehend the nitty-gritty details of his work. Casaubon's actions lead to his downfall both in the mortal realm and in the afterlife. He overworks himself and does not listen to Dorothea's advice to re-examine the importance of his work in the context of recent developments in the same field and in regards to his health. He does let Dorothea help and teaches her some of the languages he's working on eventually, but this is too late, and his actions lead him to contracting an illness which would kill him if he did not stop. His lack of empathy stops him from making meaningful relationship that would have served him after he could not work on his project, and he throws himself back into it, which leads to his death. Eventually, some change from Dorothea's perspective happened. She did start to get acquainted with him a bit better and become more closer to him, but still he passes away, and she feels regret as sadness as the possibility that she'll have to labor to complete Casaubon's work. She knows it's futile, but she still resolves to do it. Casaubon, however, shoots himself in the foot with his last will. He prohibits Ladislaw and Dorothea from marrying. This was not something that either at that moment was planning to do, but by doing it, he sealed their fate as well as his. He did not care for Ladislaw or consider his wife's feeling on the matter, and in the end, his name was forgotten and all he had would rot, with his wealth benefiting no one. Featherstone will revealed a similar issue, and he also died with his remembrance in jeopardy, but in the end, his action or his belief ensured his will, in truth at least, was carried out. Bulstrode, the other antagonistic entity in the book, is similar, but his sin is, rather than a lack of understanding of right and wrong, an unwillingness to act on it. He knows what he's doing is wrong, but he still does it. He tries to rectify this with penitence, but in the eyes of God, or in this case George Eliot, penitence without an attempt of rectification leads to misery. He marries a woman who lost her daughter and hides the latter's existence from the former to acquire wealth. It is notable that he also does not do anything illegal, but like Casaubon, is still immoral. Unlike Casaubon, this is also considered bad in terms of the contemporary morals. Bulstrode seems to be capable of empathy, but he frames his understanding more on the concept of morality rather than caring for others. He's self-pitying and attempts to frame everything by the ironclad rule of Anglicanism, or at least his understanding of it, and he does not extend to others the same liberty he extends to himself in renouncing their sins. In his case, it's not his understanding of right and wrong that's the issue, but the why. It's more complicated in that, of course, as he does not change, but rather behaves strictly to circumvent his guilt. Again, like Casaubon, this is similar to how real people deal with their guilt. We often treat ourselves better than others, and whenever we do something wrong, we always try and make excuses for ourselves. Bulstrode is philanthropic, but only when it suits his purpose, and he says as much to Lightgate. He gives the latter money to hopefully stave off suspicion, but moments earlier refuses an ask made of need. In a sense, you get that while to some extent he is guilty of evil and is knowledgeable about this fact, his flaw comes from his framing. He feels bad about what he did, but more so because of what could happen to him either in this life or the next than what happened to his victims. He's not incapable of compassion, but he deeply represses it. Casaubon and Bulstrode operate in similar social circles and have similar statuses, but they're both selfish, and this leads to a downfall. The other characters are perhaps callous in their action, but they're never selfish, and this sets these two apart from the rest of the cast, apart from the minor characters. Still, the author shares to them what they fail to give to others. She gives them empathy. However, there's one character I believe was failed by the narrative, and that is Rosamund. She's characterized as intelligent and charming the first time you meet her, and after having witty banter with her brother, is woven to the hearts of both Lightgate and the reader. Her thoughts of the other men in town, her higher education, and her pretensions about marriage are all laid out beautifully. And while we can see she does not have all the information that she may need, we empathize with her and support her action. Then she gets married. After this, she mainly acts as an hindrance to Lightgate, and while we get a glimpse into her thoughts, they're now sparse and barren. Her worst moment comes when she solicits one of Lightgate's rich relatives, and this shuts the duo out of a potential source of income after her husband had warned her not to. After this, she breaks into tears and blames Lightgate for the collective misfortune. While he is still at fault to a degree, we get a more empathetic view of him than we do of her, which is a shame. Rosamund feels more of an obstacle and burden for Lightgate to overcome than a real person with wants and needs. Of course, there are people who behave similar to her in reality, but the same can be said for Casaubon and Bulstrode, and they're very well illustrated with great time put into their thoughts and inner worlds. She also plays a part in the misunderstanding plotline between Ladislav and Dorothy at the end of the story. These can be draining in most romances, but here it's over relatively quickly. Rosamund gets her redemption here, and while it makes her more sympathetic, she's still not given empathy, nor is she remorseful for prior actions. I do appreciate the attempt at portraying a flawed marriage, but Rosamund is definitely not treated with the respect she deserves as a character. Lightgate is flawed too, but the empathy afforded to him makes him interesting read, while Rosamund falls to the wayside. My favorite character outside of the main cast is Caleb Garth. He is eminently likable, charming, caring, responsible, and has strong moral fiber. While he faces his own share of challenges, mostly due to irresponsibility, he recovers from it relatively quickly and serves as a good support for Fred and Mary when they need it. Having well-written, responsible adult characters and parental figures with no skeletons in the closet is not too prevalent in literature, and while it may not be as rare as some other tropes, when these characters exist, they usually serve either plot development in unfortunate ways or are absent from the main narrative. So it's nice to see Caleb be presented in the story and not suffer for it too much. It's realistic in a way that's mundane, not so often depicted in fiction, but I appreciate its inclusion for it. Dorothea is amazing too, and probably is my favorite character from the main cast, though I do like all of them, Rosamund being the obvious exception. She is kind and compassionate, and also fiery and passionate. Her idiosyncrasies are fun, and I really like how Celia, Chetam, and Ladislaw all react to it. There's a lot to discuss about her and the rest of the work, and I cannot hope to do it all now, but one point of contention I will cover is the ending. In the preface and epilogue, Dorothea is compared to Saint Teresa and Antigone, examples of heroic women, and is said to have the same fiber as them, but is not recognized due to the time period she occupies. I think this is representative of the treatment of women of this era and some degree of rightful resentment towards it. Dorothea is not afforded the same opportunities as her male contemporaries, nor the extremely specific circumstances of her female forebearers. A marriage with Ladislav ends with him becoming an MP. This can be disappointing to readers, but I think it's a satisfactory conclusion. Dorothea is still heroic. Throughout the story, she works on the development of those around her and improves their material conditions. Despite her naivety, this is played straight, unlike the efforts of many of her literary contemporaries, such as Tolstoy's Pierre Bezukov. She helps Ladislav become a better person, and it's clear that she shares a good deal of responsibility for his attributed accomplishments. The duo care for each other, and it's not implied anywhere that Ladislav is incognizant of what she did for him. They support each other, like any duo in a good relationship, even non-romantic ones should. A reader may fall into the same trap that Dorothea's contemporaries do, where they fail to see Dorothea's accomplishments due to the lack of attribution. Dorothea helps the world and does not care for praise. A society that fails to still give her praise despite that is flawed. Still, she did a lot of good, and in life, we should hope to do good too. Ranking. The 10 point of 5-star rating system is something that feels a bit arbitrary, so I've devised a new method that I find more appealing. I've designed this to work around most works of art, though some fare better in it than others. This is primarily based on two primary factors: the competence of a work and its excellence. I define competence as how well made something is constructed, and this is on a 10-point scale. A 5 is something that's competently made, a 4 and 6 represent slightly and below and above par. A 3 and 7 means something is very poorly or very well made, and 2 and 8 are something that barely function or greatly exceeds quality standards and astonishes. 1 and 9 are the absolute nadir and pinnacle of work and are on the cusp of human achievement. Though since 1 is non-functioning, there are more examples of 1s than 9s. A 0 or 10 are beyond human achievement and present just for scale or an unforeseen future scenario. The excellence of a work refers to a scope primarily, as well as its aesthetic and mythological merit. This is simply less quantifiable than the competence and can be understood as greatness, as nebulous of a term that is. It uses a similar scale as the competence, though works on a bell curve. Most published works will be around a 5 on the competence scale, but the excellence scale is designed around a hypothesized binomial distribution bell curve around prominent works. There are still more 1s than 9s. This may be hard to imagine, but you can say that about 80% of a stuff is a 5 on competence and 50% is a 5 on excellence. There are also way more published works above or at a 5 on competence than below it, while the distribution on the excellence scale is about even both ways, published or not. It should also be noted that there may be great variation between values with the same rank, especially on the E scale. Two 8s may be very different if they're high 8 or low 8. This will be clarified if it becomes controversial. There are also arbitrary ranking factors which deal with things outside the two primary factors. This deals with things like personal preference, cultural standards, creative vision, how it fares relative to other works in the medium, whimsy, and other unquantifiable factors. This slightly affects the E&C rankings, but primarily combines with the other two to affect my personal arbitrary informed rank, or pair. Pair operates on a symbol scale and is dependent on the medium of the work. 5 stars suggests the work is in my top 3 favor of the medium, 3 stars suggests it's in the top 10, 2 stars suggests it's the bottom or near the top 10, a single star suggests a great work, 2 pluses that something is very good, a single plus is good, and a minus is bad. 2 minuses surrounding a symbol suggest that a work has been downranked, and the symbol in the middle is a new rank. Pair ranks can change a lot, and I may often re-evaluate a work to lower or raise a pair rank. An N is something that I do not have a strong opinion on, either negative or positive. Oh, how does Middlemarch fare? On the C rank, the prose is excellently written, the plot construction allows for good coverage of characters, plot lines interact with each other well, and the book is enjoyable and not too challenging as a read. The coverage of Rosamund leaves something to be desired. I chose to implicate this here as it does not detract from the grandness of the work on the E scale. The book scores a 7 on the C score. The E rank is fun. Middlemarch deals with a large group of characters and is ambitious in its coverage of themes, emotions, and plot lines. They're very intelligently portrayed ideas, and it deals with the feelings experienced by human society well. While the location and places are simple and quaint, its deep emotional scope gives it a high re rank. It scores an 8. I really like this book. It speaks to the human experience and stands out among its contemporaries in not being too overly optimistic or pessimistic. It feels real despite being enjoyable to read, and this is actually much harder than most realize. Real life is pretty boring, yet Middlemarch feels like real life and is still interesting and fun. I would consider it one of my favorite novels and probably my favorite British novel. It scores 5 stars on Pair. Book rankings are fickle and it may be D-ranked soon, but it will hold 3 or 2 stars for a long time. Well, was my first feature-length video. It is more of a proof of concept than an actual thing that I should have done a bit more editing and stuff, but I am still kind of proud of it. I don't expect this will get many views, and I don't hope it will, but it's nice, making a video on your own. It's fun. I actually rushed a bit on this because I'm going to be quite busy in the coming weeks, so I wanted to get this done while I still can. I will try and get subtitles soon, but again, my schedule is a bit packed, so it might take a while. If you are still watching this, thank you, and I don't know, read the book. Like, if you still haven't read this and you're still watching this, read it. Stop. Like, read the book. It's pretty good. Thank you. See ya.